It is 2 p.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 4 on a Monday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gon-young. This is ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. The Suwon District Court has decided that leftist lawmaker Lee Seok-ki of the Unified Progressive Party violated the national security law and has been found guilty of leading a clandestine pro-North Korea group called the Revolutionary Organization. The reading of the verdict, which began roughly 2 hours ago, is still going on as we speak. The court said it has found that Lee has pro-North Korea documents in his possession and has previously sung North Korean military songs, both of which are prohibited under the South national security law. Now, 2 weeks ago, South Korean prosecutors demanded a 20-year prison term for Lee. Now let's move over to Egypt. A deadly bus bombing in Egypt on Sunday has left at least 4 people dead, including 3 Koreans. The Egyptian government is investigating the incident, and Korea's foreign ministry has dispatched a delegation to the site of the attack earlier this morning. ARIRANG News Foreign Affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
At least 4 people, including 3 Koreans, were killed Sunday after an explosion ripped through a tourist bus near a border crossing between Egypt and Israel. South Korea's foreign ministry confirmed that a Korean tourist, 2 Korean tour guides, and an Egyptian bus driver were killed in the explosion, while 12 tourists were wounded and are being treated at a nearby hospital. 15 survivors have crossed the border into Israel, accompanied by a South Korean embassy staff member. The bus was carrying 35 people who were waiting to cross the border to Israel after spending a night at Sinai when an armed man, suspected to be in his 20s, threw a bomb at the bus. The Korean tourist group was reportedly on a 12-day pilgrimage that included stops in Turkey, Egypt, and Israel. The Egyptian government has declared the incident a terrorist attack and is investigating the case. Whether the attack was targeting Koreans remain unclear, and no group has stepped forward to take responsibility. Once a popular tourist destination, Sinai has been rocked by several attacks since the army ousted President Mohamed Morsi last July. Korea's foreign ministry dispatched a delegation to Egypt on Monday morning, and they will join officials from the Korean embassies in Egypt and Israel at the site of the attack. The ministry also set up a task force and held an emergency meeting shortly after the incident was reported to come up with countermeasures. The ministry has issued a special travel warning for Egypt, practically banning Koreans from visiting the region, and has asked Koreans traveling in Egypt and its 4 neighboring countries, Israel, Jordan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, to return as soon as possible. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now shifting gears to a long overdue round of reunions for families separated since the Korean War. Final preparations are currently underway. Now with only 3 days left until the reunions are set to get underway, anticipation is building for what will be the first such event in over 3 years. ARIRANG News Kim Ji-yeon reports.
A 15-member South Korean delegation arrived in Mangkungang over the weekend to fine-tune the details for an upcoming round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The delegation, comprising officials from the Unification Ministry and members of the Red Cross, is hoping to ensure the reunion venue and accommodations are in good condition.
We will do our best to make sure the family reunions proceed smoothly.
The main concern is the weather. Snowplows have already removed most of the 2 meters of snow that fell at Mount Kungang last week, but forecasters have issued a preliminary warning for another snowstorm this week. The delegation also submitted the final list of those participating in the reunions. On the first day of the event, 84 South Koreans will reunite with family in the north. 3 days later, 88 North Koreans will reunite with family members from the south. The 2 Koreas agreed last week to proceed with the reunions, despite an earlier demand by Pyongyang that the reunions could only happen if the South postponed an upcoming military exercise with the United States. Seoul has repeatedly stated that the reunions and the military exercises should be dealt with separately. If the reunions go ahead as planned, it will be the first such event in over 3 years. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
It's been a year in the making, and on Monday, a UN panel is set to conclude North Korea should face international punishment for its systematic abuse of its own people. Now, according to reported leaks of its findings, the UN Commission of Inquiry on the North Human Rights will say the regime has committed crimes against humanity and should be referred to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. North Korea has long been accused of grave rights abuses ranging from holding hundreds of thousands of political prisoners in concentration camps to committing torture and public executions. Pyongyang has long denied those accusations. The commission will present its final report to the UN Human Rights Council next month. Now, shifting our focus, 3 of the nation's largest credit card firms are being subject to a 3-month business suspension starting this Monday as punishment for the leak of millions of customers' financial data. The Financial Services Commission says KB Financial Group, Nonghyuk Financial Group, and retailer Lotte Group have been banned from issuing new credit and debit cards or extending loans until May 16th. Now, existing customers will be provided with financial services as usual. The 3 firms estimate the business suspension will cost them a combined $1.9 billion in lost business. Tens of millions of cardholders were affected by last month's breach, the largest in the country's history. The Korean government is aiming to give the economy another shot in the arm by announcing the detailed measures of its 3-year economic plan. The package of measures to be officially laid out before the end of this month will focus on cutting red tape and boosting the country's 5 brightest sectors, including education, finance, and software. Shin Se-min reports.
The Korean government is gearing up a new 3-year economic plan that includes a negative list system for deregulation in an effort to boost investment. Government officials said Sunday that the new plan will ease restrictions within regulations and streamline red tape. The new plan will mainly bolster Korea's promising industrial sectors, namely health, education, tourism, finance, and software. The plan, which will be announced before the end of the month, also aims to boost the number of women and young people in the workforce and ease the financial burden of private education. In an effort to raise the nation's slumping youth employment level, students not entering university will be able to receive vocational training. The government will also provide financial support to small and medium-sized media content developers to promote the sector as a high-valued industry. The government will also adjust underground economic activities, enforce strict taxation, and eliminate unfair business practices on smaller companies. Regarding the inter-Korean relations, the government is also looking to include reunification matters as part of the 3-year plan. President Park Geun-hye has said her administration has set itself a 4-7-4 goal by the end of her term, which means 4% economic growth, a 70% employment rate, and an annual per capita income of around $40,000. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
We turn to business today. First, a look at the local bourse. Korean shares closed at their highest level in nearly 4 weeks on this Monday as investors were cheered on by positive growth data from the Eurozone that boosted hopes for the global economy. Now, at the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi closed up 0.3%, ending the trading session at 1946, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq closed down by 0.1%. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency finished stronger against the greenback at 1,060.5 won. There have been many reports in the past few years that the proportion of middle-class households in Korea is shrinking quickly. And to address this problem, the Korean government is reportedly trying to come up with a new definition of middle class. Well, for a more in-depth look into this issue, we're joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Byung-ju, the head of KLMP Consulting and our regular commentator on this program. Dr. Kim, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, we've known for some time that the middle class in this country has been on a quick decline, but the government is now trying to redefine the middle class. Now, why is that?
Right. Basically, so far, at least, middle class in Korea has been defined with one measurement, that is disposable income. And what's happening is, based on that, government has realized, as well as the public has also realized, that this is not a sufficient measurement here, because there's a big gap between what people see or perceive on one hand and this measurement of disposable income tells us. And we have an international standard using this disposable income to define middle class, but in Korea it's not well accepted by the public itself. So as a part of the 3-year reform plan that you just talked about, government is interested in introducing new measurements for defining middle class here. Well, now the critics and skeptics are quick to speculate whether government is taking steps back from its grand vision of restoring middle class to account for 70% of the population. I don't think it is the case. The government has formed a special task force team to address this concept of middle class and then promotion of middle class here, and they're working on it right at this point to add more additional measurements in addition to the disposable income. So I think this will be announced together with the 3-year reform plan that you just talked about. So many eyes are closely watching what the outcome would be.
Now, the government's definition of middle class has changed over the years.
Right.
I think it's important to look at how it has evolved.
Indeed, critics have been very vocal in terms of government, in their view, abusing the varying definition of the middle class. They have criticized the government for using different definitions and different occasions to serve the government's interest without sticking to one permanent one. Let's bring up the graphics that we have prepared here. Usually what happens is the OECD measurement is the world standard. There you come up with a median income, and then from there 50% up and then 50% down. We usually talk about them, we call them middle class. But here in Korea, if you do that, the overall range, a lot of people feel is just too wide. And as you can see, at different occasions, government has used different ranges, and this is not the whole story. We are just taking 2 examples here on the left side and the center here. And the interesting thing is that the right-hand side arrow, up and down, that range was introduced, or it comes out when we conduct a survey among the Korean people whom you think what should be the range of middle income itself. And so there's a big gap between what government has said on one hand, and then also OECD standard, which is way off from what people perceive, as you can see on the right-hand side as an example there. So the gap has been just way too big. So that is a problem.
Actual problem that we see either in perception or in actual numbers is that the middle class is shrinking, right?
Right. For sure, that's the case. For example, if we look back year 2000, in terms of conventional OECD and government measurement, among the Korean population, the middle class used to account for over 70%, which is the current government's goal for restoring back to that level. Now, after 10 years, back in 2010, the overall size has shrunken close to 67%. Now we are talking about 65%, which, by the way, as I mentioned, the math does not accept as a definition of middle class here. So in the absolute terms and the more objective, so-called objective terms, middle class is shrinking for sure. But in perception surveys, it's even more serious here. Back in 1998, the respondents used to say in surveys saying, well annual, the income of about 2.4 million won, monthly income of 2.4 million won would qualify someone as a middle class. That was 1998. But now, last year, according to Hyundai Research Institute, people are saying, well, it has to be 5 million won per month to be qualified as middle class. It could make a lot of people feel pretty bad. So there's a big gap between, within 15 years' time, the range has doubled.
Right.
And that's insane because in a Korean economy, in reality, that didn't happen at all. So the perception, people's perception of what qualifies as a middle class has gone way up. And what's even worse than that is a lot of people are feeling that they belong to low-income class.
Right.
As many as 47% of Koreans recently surveyed feel that they belong to low-income class. And what that means is basically the sense of relative deprivation, and also the feeling that this society does not help help people who try hard. The about hope for the social mobility itself is going down. What that means is overall dynamism for the society is going down. So this is a big cause of huge concern for not only economists but also sociologists.
Right. I mean, it's actually the public or consumer sentiment that matters a lot in a domestic economy.
Very much.
And
Yes.
obviously, this isn't the most positive news.
Right.
And it makes me feel like, I'm at poverty line. But moving on, how will the government redefine the middle class to close the gap between reality and perception?
There are so many different speculations. Some of the Korean media outlets are saying, well, let's look into what other countries do. And some reporters mentioned French standard that was introduced back several decades ago by President Pompidou at that time. And he was saying middle-class French should come in with capability to speak at least one foreign language and a capability to play a musical instrument. Well, I don't think that's exactly going to happen, added here in Korea. Oxford University and the BBC in the UK said, well, the sense of fairness and the desire to stand up against injustice really are key qualities. But I don't think those kind of cultural and sociological factors will be included. Government is going to try add more economic measurements here in Korea, such as going beyond disposable income, net assets. Here in Korea, apartments are very big, right? It's a big part of the assets. So they will add those, and then some people are saying they'll add the size of cars. I don't like that because in Korea, there's a bad habit of thinking that you have to drive big cars, but that's going to make the situation worse. But there is that speculation going on. So we'll have to wait and see on the outcome of that specific set of measurements.
Right. And what about government policy? Is that going to change according to this redefinition?
That's a huge dilemma for this current government because current government has declared that they want to restore the size of the middle class back to 70%. But if you add these kind of measurements, naturally the size of the middle class, this starting point will shrink. So the goal of achieving 70% will go even further ahead, and there will be greater distance. So there is a dilemma for the government. Will government choose the political goal of achieving and showing off that we achieved the 70% with the current measurement? Or with additional measurements, will government say, well, we didn't exactly achieve it? So there is a political dilemma. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. But overall, however, government will gradually move, I think, away from just total focus on helping the lower income people to move up the ladder and become a middle class according to the conventional measurement. But I think government will focus more on actually giving direct help to those people who actually belong to the middle class now, such as education support and the addressing concern about their real estates, apartment holdings and all that. So I can sense personally the government will add more focus in their policy choices.
Right. Well, we all know that in a market economy, it's very important to have a strong and big size middle class bracket.
Absolutely.
And hopefully that because this is not only an economic issue, but social as well as seems like psychological factors play a role.
Sure.
So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out and how this redefinition of the middle class would help us close the gap in the society.
Right. Very interesting issue there.
All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, thank you so much for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
With rapid changes in the global economy, up-to-date business and financial news has never been more essential. See what's making markets tick around the globe. We speak to the experts and cover the biggest financial stories.
North Korea provocation.
Quite good. We received a lot of positive feedback, especially from those abroad.
Let me just give you this breaking news that's coming in. We're just getting reports that a Korean court has sentenced leftist lawmaker Lee Seok-ki 12 years in prison on sedition charges. We'll have more on that story in our later newscast. Now moving on, maverick independent lawmaker An Chol-soo has a dream of shaking up Korean politics, and now his new party, which will officially launch next month, has a name. It's the New Political Vision Party. The name was officially approved at a party meeting in Seoul on Monday, where An and some 320 members started laying the groundwork for the party's upcoming launch. An supporters established a central steering committee that will be the top decision-making body over the next few weeks. The former independent presidential candidate and his aides also agreed to work on ways to boost party membership nationwide ahead of local elections in June. Now, Korea's southern coast has been hit by yet another disastrous oil spill, this time in waters off the port city of Busan. Well over 200,000 liters of oil leaked into the water after a freighter collided with an oil tanker on Saturday. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
237,000 liters. That's how much oil officials say gushed into the sea after a Liberian-registered freighter collided with an oil tanker on Saturday. The amount of oil spilled is over 70,000 liters more than during another oil spill in Yeosu last month. Over the weekend, the Coast Guard managed to place a 500-meter-long oil fence around the main spill to try and contain it, and chemical dispersants are being sprayed onto it. The police said they succeeded in sealing off the hole in the vessel 3 hours after the collision. The only positive news thus far is that no oil has been found near the seashore yet, and no cases of contamination damage have been reported. There are, however, concerns fish farms about 5 kilometers from the spill could become contaminated. The Maritime Police say it'll take about 4 days of cleanup work to prevent any secondary damage.
We have 70 vessels deployed to contain the spill, including response vessels. The cleanup work is expected to take a few more days.
The Korea Coast Guard suspects poor weather conditions and high waves to be the main cause of the crash. But the Maritime Police say they'll launch a probe to determine the exact cause of the accident as soon as the cleanup work is finished. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Moving over to Sochi, where it's day 11 of the Winter Olympics, but the weekend was full of action as well. Now, from Team Korea's third medal coming from short track speed skating to now Russian Victor On's gold, our Lee Tae-ho has a wrap-up. Tae-ho, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let's go ahead and kick this Monday afternoon off with a recap of all the latest action from the Sochi 2014 Winter Olympics. Over the weekend, figure skating queen Kim Yeona had her first practice on the ice in the rink, where she will be competing this week. Although she had previously said that she did not like the ice in another practice rink in Sochi, she said that the condition of the ice in the main rink was good and better than she had expected. She'll be in action for the first time at the Sochi Olympics on Thursday for her short program, and then again on Friday for her free skate. And the Korean men's bobsled team is also in action, with the 2-person event kicking off earlier today. Team A for Korea, consisting of Won Yoon-jung and Seo Young-woo, finished with a time of 57.41 seconds in their first heat, while Kim Dong-hyun and Chun Jung-lin for Team B finished with a time of 57.78 seconds. Both teams finished with slightly faster times in their second runs, putting Team A in 19th place and Team B in 25th. We'll be keeping our fingers crossed for their last run later on tonight. And the storied Jamaican bobsledding team also saw action for the first time in 12 years. And the Jamaican Tourism Agency has created a cheer song and video supporting their national team. The music and video sync perfectly with the track at Sochi, so start the video when the Jamaican team starts their run for a combination of music and sports. And although they are currently in last place, they should be proud with all they have overcome to make it to these games. And now moving on to the women's 1500-meter speed skating competition, where the Dutch continue their dominance on the ice. After the race, the women of the Netherlands took over the podium, taking gold, silver, and bronze. Jorian Termoors finished first with a new Olympic record of 1 minute 53.51 seconds, while teammate Irene Wust finished second and Lot van Beek wrapped it up for the Dutch. Meanwhile, Team Korea's Kim Bo-rum finished 21st, while Do Sun-young came in at 29th, and Yang Shin-young was 36th. And we wrap up today's coverage of the Sochi 2014 Winter Olympics with what to watch tonight and the current medal standings. I'm Lee Tae-ho, and I'll see you again tomorrow for all of the latest news from the Sochi Winter Games.
Well, weather-wise in Sochi, the temperatures have dropped quite a bit with a high of 7 degrees Celsius, which is welcome news where there has been a meltdown of snow for snow slope athletes. And that brings us to the end of this newscast, but stay tuned to ARIRANG. We have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6.